Before I start, I want to say, before the session started, the speakers were joking about how our talks had nothing in common. Now, having seen two of them, I can tell you there are recurring themes that I've been seeing over and over that are common with my talks. We've got a lot in common. So my talk is going to be on CT protocol review. I'm going to be addressing questions like, why should you do CT protocol review? What is CT protocol review? I'm going to talk about some different approaches to this, and also how particularly we do this at UAB. But my focus is not going to be on the, well, I get these people involved from these groups and we meet so many times a year, but focus on the technical aspects of the review. So first of all, I want to talk about why do we do CT protocol review? And the first answer anyone will come up with is dose. A lot of you will remember a few years ago, there was a manufacturer came out with a new brain perfusion protocol that had default settings that just peaked out the tube current with the intention that the applications people would set these to a clinically appropriate settings. That didn't happen at every center. No one was looking at the protocols in detail, and so we were starting to see pictures like this in the front page of the New York Times. This grabbed everyone's attention. This has been the driving force behind CT protocol review, is to keep things like this from ever happening again. But there are other things that you should pay attention to in CT protocol review. Image quality. I recently got a call from one of our radiologists. He pointed me at these two studies. These was the same patient done on two Philips scanners, 5 years apart, with nominally similar protocols. Why is the one on the right so much blurrier than the one on the left? I said, okay, I'll look into it. And the first thing I looked at, well, of course, different image filter kernel. Nope. Both had the same detail D filter kernel. What I found out was that one was a standard acquisition resolution and the other was a high resolution acquisition. All of a sudden, reviewing the resolution of the acquisition became a high priority in my protocol review. But these are the kind of details you really have to be paying attention to. This was something that in the last talk was mentioned, hanging protocols. This is very, very important from the point of view of the radiologist workflow. This particular radiologist likes to see coronal bodies down there and axials without here and axials with contrast there. Well, how does the software know to put each one of those images in the appropriate location? And at least in our facility, it bases that off the Recon series description. Unfortunately, we haven't been standardizing the Recon series descriptions. With 15 different scanners and body routine body protocols, you might have an abd-ax on one, abd-pel axial on another, body-ax on a third. This drives the hanging protocol software nuts. So when I say, if you tell the your department chair, I can fix your hanging protocols, then the next thing you do is you start looking what those Recon series descriptions are. The final question is, why do CT protocol review? The final answer is because you gotta. State of Texas is right now, I believe, the only place in the United States where this is actually required by law. They require that all CT radiation protocols are reviewed annually. Well, if you look into the details of what the law actually states, this means what kind of dose do you expect on this, in this exam, what's your action level, what are you going to do if a patient goes above that action level. But I've also been told by people practicing in the state of Texas, the state inspectors want to see more than that too. They want to see more like a real CT protocol review going on. Joint Commission, of course, is the 800-pound gorilla of this field. That may not quite carry the force of law, but I can assure you if your hospital loses accreditation because your CT protocol was the final straw and it broke the camel's back, it's not going to make any difference to whether or not this carries legal weight. They require that you review all the imaging protocols, and they go into they want fairly detailed reviews. Indications, what kind of patient problems are going to cause this particular exam protocol to be used? What's your protocol for injected contrast administration? Is this protocol for adults, children, infants? What's the expected CTDI and so forth? What makes this a little bit easier is the periodicity is up to the facility. If you touch each protocol once every 10 years, that satisfies the TJC. They mainly want to make sure that you have a process of going through these periodically. The ACR, I guess, is the 600-pound gorilla, and the accreditation program there is fairly weak about this. All it states is that the physicist should review clinical protocols annually. It's not even clear whether or not they're saying all the clinical protocols. However, the quality assurance manual, quality control manual, is a little bit more detailed. They want the radiologist and the physicist and a technologist involved in an annual review of all the protocols, and this is a fairly detailed review involving KV, MAS, detector configuration, image pitch, and so forth. I should say one of the SAM's questions does involve what the ACR requires for protocol review. Well, what they require is what's in the accreditation program. To the best of my knowledge, what's in the quality control manual are only recommendations. If you follow those recommendations, you're very likely to fulfill the requirements. But again, those are recommendations. AAPM, the Professional Guidance Practice Guidelines, it's a very good document that details in much closer detail, as you would expect, than these other recommendations and requirements. Their recommendations are that things be reviewed monthly to biannually, depending on circumstances. A monthly review of all protocols, I think everyone would agree, is overkill. But, monthly meetings where you're reviewing a few protocols is not a bad idea. And something that they consider all important is also a dated history of the documents. As you're making changes to the protocols, you document those changes and what protocols got changed and when and so forth. But this is the only thing where the word verification appears. Now, the title of my talk is Validation and Verification. What does that mean? Validation and verification are terms from ISO 9000, which is a set of standards for quality control procedures. Validation basically is a process to ensure that the system you are designing, whatever it is, building car, automobile, CT protocol, that it meets what the intended use is. Well, in CT protocols, this means, does this protocol give the radiologist the image that they want? Are we using no more than the amount of radiation that's necessary for this? Is the injected contrast media appropriate for this? You don't want to, giving patient too much injected contrast is as bad, maybe worse, than giving them too much radiation. Verification is the hard part of all this, making sure that what's on the scanner is what you intend to be on the scanner. You can have a lot of people meeting twice a year, reviewing documents and protocols and so forth, but that's just wasted paperwork if the documents that you're working on don't actually reflect what's on the scanner. So I'm going to be talking about how various approaches you can follow to do both validation and verification. The first one of these is what I call console-based review. This is where you get a radiologist, technologist, and a physicist sit at the console and start going through the protocols that are on the console. And this process varies a lot from one model to another. For example, this is a Philips Brilliance 64. You get this nice hierarchical tree of here's an acquisition. The acquisition's got a axial reconstruction that's built off that. Then there is a coronal reconstruction that's built off that axial. And then there is a dialog box with a bunch of different tabs where you get all the details on things like here we have KVP and the average patient MAS, which is what Philips Brilliance uses for their the parameter control AEC. Label the interval and thickness of images, where is it going, is it going to be set to PACS or not, and then things like collimation, helical pitch, rotation time, and so forth. And after you've gone through all these tabs for all of the acquisitions and all of the images on this protocol, time to move on to the next one, and then you've got another scanner, and this can be fairly time-consuming. And an important part of the time-consuming thing is this has to be done at the scanner. So the scanner's not going to be in clinical use while you're doing this, and you've got to get all 3 people to the scanner at the same time. The Philips ICT, they've got a system. I think it's a little bit more user-friendly in that you have more information that's on the screen at a time. One thing that's a little bit different is, again, we've got this hierarchical menu up here. You notice you don't specify the abdominal coronal is built straight off of the acquisition. You don't have to tell it which of your axial acquisitions the coronal is built off, which is a difference in the way the protocols are set up that I'll be getting to a little later. The ICT also has another feature that's kind of nice. You can go to their exam card manager and then click on this button down here where it says print and text. And when you do that, what you'll end up getting is sort of this nice user-friendly description of each protocol, which you can actually send to a printer or save to a USB flash drive to look at later. The Discovery, the GE Discovery HD has got a different setup where now you have, instead of having a single screen that'll show you all the acquisitions in Recon series, you pretty much get one acquisition series at a time. And so here you've got all of the acquisition parameters. In order to see the Recon parameters associated with this, you have to click on this tab up here, and now you see what the Recon parameters are. Oh, by the way, this is yellow down here. There's another Recon series. We look at there, and we see what the Recon parameters are here. Oh, this button says DMPR new. What that means is there are MPR series that are built off this acquisition. So if you want to see what those are, you have to click on there. Well, this one's got a single one that's called ABD core, abdominal coronal. Well, what's the image thickness and what's the image interval on that, and is this a MIP or a non-MIP? Well, we can click on ABD core to see if that's, no, that doesn't tell you, because now what that gives you is a selection of these MPR protocols that you can choose from. And you can see there's about 6 of them that start with ABD core. How do you find out what the parameters are on each of those? You have to open up another application. So you get up to here, and you click on ImageWorks, and you select one of the studies that's currently on the scanner, and you get this up, and now that this is up, you go and you click this batch button over here, and now the batch button is up. Okay, this is not the ABD core protocol we want to look at. I mean, we've got the information we want, the image thickness, spacing between images. This is an average MPR, but not a MIP. Oh, but we pull down this menu here to change the protocol we're looking at. Okay, I can see 4 ABD cores here, and I only can see the first 7 characters. I don't know which one I'm looking at. This is the time at which you throw up your hands and say, this is not working. Another approach is what I call document-based review. A lot of scanners these days can put out documents, whether to a printer or to a USB flash drive, that contain protocol information. I've already talked a little bit about the Philips ICT and that dialog box that you get that up. Here is how much information you get for a routine head, which is fairly simple. That's a lot of information to review. It's not really set up in a way that's particularly easy to review, though it's better than some of the other stuff that I've shown you. And it's also true when you review, whether you review on the console or you're reviewing something like this, you're doing validation and verification at the same time, because you're actually, validating what's on the scanner. You don't have to verify that it's been put there. Okay, this Siemens Somatome Force, which is a scanner that we just got in-house a couple of months ago. It puts out an Excel file that you can read, an XML file you can look at in a web browser or read in Excel, and it's got a more compact bit of information in here. I think you could probably do a decent job of reviewing this. But things aren't going down from here. GE Revolution, it will put out a file that you can import into Excel, and it's spread out kind of weirdly. There's information in here that you don't particularly care about. Do the lights come on at the start of the scan? I don't care. There are bits of information that it doesn't have. Window and level settings, not in this file. Helical pitch is hidden somewhere in here, but I think it's under the name speed, and what that means is the number of detector rows that the table moves during one rotation of the gantry. Who designed this? It's not very easy. Philips Brilliance, you can actually go to your vendor rep, get an application that you can put on a flash drive, stick it in, you go into the operating system, it's a Windows operating system, run this, it'll produce a file you can import to Excel that does a fairly good job of showing you all the acquisition parameters. Does a lousy job in Recons because it only shows you the reconstruction parameters on the last Recon series of the acquisition. Well, if there's one Recon series I want to look at, it's probably the first one, but there's lots of missing information there. GE Discovery, if you want to copy protocols from one scanner to another, there's a utility for copying that onto a flash drive. You can put it into another scanner loaded on there. Well, that's plain text format. You can actually read through it with a text editor. And here's, I think, for our routine abdomen, the information you get, and the information you get, and the information you get, and the information you get. There is about between 500,000 and 700,000 bytes per protocol in this data. This is not a practical way to review this. So, okay, I've been talking about lots of things that I think are not good ways to do CT protocol review. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been developing at UAB and what I like about it. First thing is document-based validation. You don't go to the scanner and see what's on it is good. You start off by saying, okay, what do we want on a scanner? You put together a document, and then you get that onto the scanner. So here we have an example of what I have. It's fairly detailed, and it provides all the information that all those accrediting organizations and so forth that I was talking about earlier are looking for. For example, indications. What patient problems would cause someone to require this exam protocol? Is this an adult or a pediatric protocol? We've got injected contrast information here. We've got all the information you would need to describe the acquisitions, including how many different acquisition series are, and have some kind of label for those acquisition series. We've got information that is not useful to you, but is useful to the technologist. Where does the scan start? Where does the scan end? All this acquisition information is used by you to calculate an estimate for what the CTDI for this exam should be. It has a list of all the reconstruction series that are on this scanner, and with a fair amount of detail for each. One of the bits of detail is for each one of these Recon series, which acquisition was it generated from. This sounds like, obviously you'd want that on the protocol, but I mean, when I started getting involved in this, we had these standard protocol documents, but they didn't even list how many different acquisitions there were. Why? Well, the technologist knows that this is a one-phase or a two-phase or a three-phase. We're not documenting it if it's still in the brain of the technologist. You want that information here. Identify the precise image kernel. Don't just say this should be a bone or a soft tissue, because the names of those filter kernels change from one model to another, and certainly from one vendor to another. Which raises sort of the last point, is this protocol document is model specific. A lot of this information is going to be different from one model to another. Even the structure of the form will be different from one model to another. Now, these are PDF documents that are generated from Excel spreadsheets that I have. So here is the spreadsheet itself. The first tab in this thing is the scanner selection tab. You can click on this button, and this dialog box comes up that where I can use it to say, okay, which scanner do I want to be presenting information for, and particularly which protocols do I want to use, what information do I want to have visible while I'm looking this over. So, for example, here are for a liver three-phase protocol, what the structure looks like for the Philips ICT-256 and the GE Discovery 64. And most of the information on here is the same. One obvious thing that's different is the tube current specifications, which, especially since these are AEC protocols, it's quite a bit different. We also notice that we have this whole new section down here called multiplane reformats. It's because I had talked about earlier with the Philips ICT, you build an MPR series off the acquisition. On the Discovery, what you have to do, you build an MPR series off an axial series, which was built off the acquisition. So we have now a column here that says, which one of these Recon series was built off one of those axial series. Final thing that's kind of subtle, maybe I'm just being anal retentive, but you'll notice I've got my lookup table information here is listed as C, W. On the Philips scanners, they describe their lookup tables as center and width. On GE scanners, it's window width and window level. Actually, it's not just a matter of the terminology, but the order in which they're presented on the scanner changes. If you if you don't account for that when you're setting up the protocols, you've added a possible stumbling block for someone setting it up. I have seen this happen where people enter the window setting where they should have put the level and the level where they should have put the window because this was not clear on the form. Now, how do you, the way I do this is each one of these protocol pages has got two sections. There is this section, which is what I generate that PDF file from, and that contains some information like the indications that is just hard-coded in there, doesn't change from one scanner to another. But all this stuff down here, it's got Excel functions in it that refer to the second section of this worksheet, which is what I call the database, where we have for each different scanner model, I have the information that will vary from one scanner to another. And I've got the acquisition section up here and reconstruction section down there. In addition, before I take this to technologists and radiologists to review, I do a pre-validation on it. What that means is I've got another workbook that contains a lot of information in it, such as what image thicknesses are available for which settings on which scanners. This, for example, we do most of our body protocols. We use 2.5 millimeter thick axial series. We just got that new Siemens Force. It can't do 2.5 millimeter axial series. We've got to choose between 2 or 3. Those kinds of little differences are important when you're setting these protocols up. So you really need to know your scanners and limitations on them. And it's a lot of information. It's good to have it recorded in a structured manner like this. The way I use that is I've got a bunch of macros built into this workbook. One of those macros is what I call validate protocols. I can click on that, and it will allow me to select, okay, which protocols do I want to validate on, and it will run a bunch of tests like, is this coronal series? Does it actually say coronal in the label or not? Can I build this particular image thickness on this particular scanner? And when I do all that, I get a report that looks like this. So I have on this particular model scanner with this particular protocol, I've got this problem. That particular detector coverage isn't a valid one for this scanner. So I can fix these problems long before we try to get them onto the scanner. A big part of what people are going to expect you to do, and people including State of Texas, TJC, and so forth, is come up with some kind of dose estimation for for a protocol. And so either build or find a tool to do something like this, where I've got another Excel spreadsheet where I select a model and various parameters for a protocol, and it will tell me what the CTDI and the tube current that it will generate. And this is actually fairly straightforward for a manual mode where the MAS is fixed. You should be collecting that information as part of your annual quality assurance survey. When you've got AEC, it becomes a little bit more complicated. Now you've got things like in this case, the dose right index is what you instead of determining the MA, have the dose right index that will set the MA for you based on the patient size. Well, you better tell which patient size am I going to be making this estimate for. And then, again, with different scanners, the GE, they don't have that dose right index, but there's something called the noise index. And so, again, as I said, the protocol sheets have to be dependent on the scanner model. So does your dose estimation calculation. There are subtleties in this dose estimation that you have to worry about. The noise index in the GE scanners is basically what the standard deviation of the Hounsfield units would be in a uniform part of the patient, such as the liver in a non-contrast. And so, for example, with either of these two noise indexes, as your patient size goes up, the tube current goes up. If you're willing to accept more noise, such as this case, NI30, you're going to have a much lower tube current than when you're willing to require lower noise in this NI15. But there's a subtlety here. These curves are dependent not only on the noise index, but on the image thickness. So, for example, these two curves have a noise index of 20, but different thicknesses on the first Recon series that's done. The second, third, fourth Recon series built off this acquisition doesn't get just the first one. So you have to know that on the G Discovery scanner, if you change the image thickness, you're going to change the tube current unless you also change the noise index. Well, then you've got the GE Optima, where that's true, but there's an additional parameter that you can set called the dose reduction, which tells you how much you want to reduce the dose by after this calculation. And then on the GE Revolution, it doesn't have a dose reduction setting, but it will change the curve based on what the Acer level is, where Acer is GE's noise reduction algorithm. Another subtlety is, for example, here is a protocol designed for the Philips Brilliance 64, and we've got these are two different protocols. Both of them have a chest core coronal series, and they've got different image thicknesses and intervals. One's a 2.5 millimeter, the other's a 1.5. This doesn't work on the GE Discovery. The GE Discovery, if you have two different protocols that both have coronal series that have different thicknesses, they have to have different names. This was something that I learned the hard way. So in this case, since we've got different thickness and intervals, we've got to have different coronal labels here. Okay, that's the approach that I take to validation, at least in preparing the documents that I'm going to take into a radiologist and a technologist to validate. How do I do verification? How do I make sure that what we have reviewed is actually what's on the scanner? What I do is I do this electronically. I take a flash drive to each scanner and I copy some kind of file off that. What kind of file depends on the scanner, the G discovery. I use those files that you use to copy protocols from one machine to another. On the IC256, I take that HTML file that gets out, and that gets onto my flash drive. And I've got software that can parse all of these different formats of files and put them into pretty much a vendor-independent format. So, for example, here I've got this database of all my scanners, and I can go ahead and click on this imported selected scanners button, and it will tell me, okay, for each of these scanners, which date do you want to look at? Because I've got I've got a separate set of parameters each time I load this down, and then I hit OK, and I get this hierarchical tree of information. So I mean, I can expand this out and say, you know, for this group of exams and this exam and this acquisition and this recon, this is really not that practical for protocol review. What's a little bit better is this format where I've now got this for a particular scanner, particular group, particular exam protocol. I've got this tabular format. And this tabular format is the same for different models and different vendors of scanners. And so, you know, that simplifies, if we're going to use this for making sure that what I'm seeing on the scanner matches a protocol document, that's fairly straightforward. But I've also taken this sort of one step further into electronic verification. So here, I go back to my database page and click on this button over here that says Verify Standard Exams. Those Excel spreadsheets I talked about earlier, I can export a text file out of those that gets imported into this software, and now I can compare the files that I'd copied off the scanner with those standardized exam protocols. So that first I'll get this dialog box that gives me a quick summary. Man, we're in bad shape. 0 of 32 protocols match. And we've got an awful lot of protocols that we don't have standard protocols defined for yet. But then they have got this sheet, which this page will give very detailed information about what's going on. For example, we had Recon CAP AX Art is not on scanner, but oh, there's an extra Recon CAP AX Art that's on scanner. There was an extra space in the label name. The hanging protocol would choke on that. This is the level of protocol review that you need in order to keep the hanging protocols working. And with electronic verification, this is the level that you can actually achieve. Not all of our, actually at this point, most of our protocols still haven't been pulled into the standardized format, but there's still tests that we can run electronically on those. And that's what I call Recon label validation. I've got a set of rules for each one of these Recon series descriptions. It has to be in our hanging protocols list. Because if it's not there, then it's not going to hang right in the hanging protocols. It has to accurately describe the series. It better not say that it's a bone series when I'm using a bone filter and bone window and level settings and so forth. It better actually fit on the scanner. Although that's less of a problem at this stage, but Philips scanners, you can't have any more than 16 characters in a series description. And that's something sometimes you have to take into account when you're putting together a protocol from scratch. But anyway, I can go and click on this button up here, Validate Recon Labels, and I will now get, again, I love these hierarchical trees, because the data we're looking at is very much hierarchical. That will detail what the various problems are with series labels on the scanner. And I can now click on this button that says Edit Validation and get another dialog box that will give me, okay, for this particular protocol, what are the various series labels that had problems? And this particular scanner, I discovered, like almost every one of our head neuro protocols had a bone series that had a soft tissue window in the lookup table, and several soft tissue series that had, and a soft tissue series that had a bone window. So basically what happened was someone set that up improperly and then copied, I copied this protocol and change it to make the next protocol, and I copied that protocol, and this mistake propagated down. And this has been on the scanner for several years, and no one had noticed. I can assure you the radiologists were swearing under their breath as they were having to play with the window and level settings at the diagnostic workstations. But, people never complain to the person that can actually do something about their problem. Okay, at any rate, I want to summarize the take-home points from this. CT protocol, do it. It's good clinical practice. It's going to improve the efficiency of your department. It's becoming more and more required by regulatory and accrediting agencies. The things to be worried about are dose, image quality, and workflow. I was told that the two single biggest problems in our department are MR hanging protocols and CT hanging protocols because of the non-standard Recon labels. It's really throwing our radiologists' efficiency downward. And so once I'm done with getting the CT protocols into shape, I'll start banging on MR's door. And the third thing is know your scanners. Every scanner has got limitations that will affect the way you put together CT protocols. Don't assume that they're all, if you're lucky enough to be in an institution where everything's a Discovery 64, everything's an ICT 256, you don't have to worry about this so much, but even then you have to do. If you're in a facility like ours where every year we're going to be buying a new CT scanner and they always want to have the latest and greatest, which means, of course, we don't have any two scanners of the same model. That's an exaggeration because we do have 3 ICT 256s, but this, as it was said earlier, variation in the scanners is the enemy of image quality. It makes your life harder, but you just got to beat down on it. But know your scanners. Validate and then verify. It's not enough to trust. One of the things that I've discovered with this electronic verification, when I tell the techs to get a particular protocol onto a scanner, and then I run the verification, then I give them a list of the mistakes they made, and they correct those, and I run verification again, and then I have to give them another list of the mistakes they made. It typically takes 2 or 3 go-rounds to get it all correct. Do not assume that just because it's on a piece of paper in someone's office that it matches what's on the scanner. Thank you for your attention.
Do we have any questions? Yes.
More of a comment than a question. I actually practice in Texas, and there's kind of a misnomer about the CT protocol. However, I think it's a good way for us to implement our value like we've been talking about, because the statement in the regulation actually is that they call it the Radiation Protocol Committee, but it's more of the Radiation Policy Committee. So we're setting policies to establish reference levels for those CT protocols and then following up on them. But if as a committee, which some of my clients I've done, we can say, hey, we want to sit down and review the protocols, then that becomes part of the regulation for that. And that's why the inspectors are a little bit lax on, are you looking at the protocols, or are you just having the meeting? So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah. I believe I'd said it, and if I hadn't intended it, it's really a radiation safety protocol kind of thing. But from what I've been talking to people, I've had a lot of confusion within the state of Texas of what it means. And you're absolutely right. It's really the radiation safety protocols that they're requiring.
Any other questions? I have a question, and I probably don't really want to know the answer to this question. And that being said, once I hear the answer, I would probably say I hope my colleagues in the back would want to undertake this and do it at our facility. The Excel sheet you have is very thorough and very nice. How long did it take to develop, and how long did it take to go through and work out all the bugs and everything? Because it looks like it's very nice. It's doing a lot of stuff. It's flagging when the scanner's not capable of doing it based on detector configuration. It's scanning when your tags are off. So I'm assuming that it's taken many iterations and a lot of time to get it where it's at now.
What made you think there's no bugs in it anymore? On Friday, I killed the last bug that I knew about, which means I'm sure there are more that are hidden. I've been working on this for about 2 years. The software that I demonstrated in addition to the spreadsheets, that's based on libraries that have been developing for 15 years. But I am planning to start trying to make this available publicly. I really don't expect other people to go through this level of work and duplicate this. That software is written in Java and will run on Windows machines or Linux or Apple Macintoshes. I just have to get it past our IP gatekeepers. I mean, I'm afraid they're going to have dollar signs flashing in their eyes. I would really like to release that as open source freeware, because I don't want to be responsible for providing technical support for the rest of my life for some very complicated software.
Any other questions? Okay, that ends the session, and then we are currently in break across the hall. Go visit the vendors. Thank you.